Wednesday afternoon, and it's 4:20 on your clock. Terrible singer. Hey, everybody. That means when it's Wednesday afternoon and it's 4:20 on the clock, that means this right here. It's happening. It's a brand new episode of Because Cannabis from Wayward Media. Every single Wednesday, brand new shows, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube. The following day, video podcasts on Spotify and anywhere that you listen to audio podcasts. Thank you for joining the show, presented by Wayward Media. My name is BC Wayman. That's Dustin Cava. How you doing today, sir?
Doing awesome, man. How are you holding up?
I am excited to be here. I'm excited for our guest today. We've had a few shows in a row of some amazing guests. In this one, we get to continue a conversation with a company that we've met before, and I feel like it's nice to have a slightly different conversation other than introducing the company and such, and we're talking about POSIBL. We had a great conversation with Jesus earlier. You can find that link in the comments below. And so to continue the conversation about what POSIBL is doing in California, not just in craft cannabis, but thinking about equity, thinking about different type of launching, thinking about how we get more diverse ownership, more diverse plants, more diverse strains, more diverse of everything out in the world. So Max Rudsten is here today, the CRO of POSIBL Project. So we're excited to talk with him in just a few moments. I don't think Max knows this yet, but he put it publicly on his LinkedIn, and I like to look at LinkedIn before I find people, and it makes me think about things I like to talk about before the show starts. And it just so happens, Dustin, that when scrolling through Max Rudsten's LinkedIn, you're going to find that he's an investor in a company of something that seems to be swirling, pun intended, around my world a lot these days. I teach a class at the Cleveland School of Cannabis. I talk about this. The other day, they were given an assignment, Dustin, to tell a story about an incident in their life. It's a standard storytelling practice. They get a minute. They have to have a beginning, a middle, and end. 50% of those stories were about one particular thing or moment that happened to them. If you had to guess what that one thing or moment is, which is for some reason a subject people are very uncomfortable to talk about, but yet in this moment, they all talked about it. What do you think it was?
Two things, either trying on trousers or going to the bathroom in a random spot, not like outside, but like in like not your home, anywhere but home.
No, it was poop. It was bathroom stuff on the second one, but I had to stop my intended written out plot to say, trying on, hold on a second. How many people have amazing stories about trying on trousers?
You didn't say amazing. I did the most miserable experiences of your life. Is
no one has any stories about trying on trousers. You know what? We're going to stop the, hold on. Stop the presses right now. Bring in the guest, Max Rudsten from POSIBL. I've never brought you in this early, but this is what happens. Give me a great story about a time that you tried on pants that was so memorable, because Dustin says that one of two possible story routes that someone might share is a bathroom incident, and I'm going to talk about your
not memorable, miserable.
It doesn't matter. No one's got any stories about trying on pants. Max, case in point. Do you have any?
Trying on pants. I was a big Janko guy back in the
snap.
You know what I mean? So
I do. Very much so.
My first pair of Janko jeans, where the mouth of the pant leg went all the way over the shoe, and then there was like this like squirrel patch, like climbing up a ladder. I feel like that's probably my most memorable pant trying on story. Hopefully that's it.
Well, that's about as good as it gets. I mean, I don't think there's too many more entertaining ones into there. Trying on trousers. And who uses the word trousers? 1950s called Dustin Cava. Anyway, they all talked about pooping, Dustin. For some reason, given the moment to not talk about anything, they talked about pooping. And it's weird because it's a subject that is very taboo and they don't talk about it. But I think about it. I think about it all the time. And I don't know if that's weird. I think about it all the time. I told my colonoscopy story on here. So I'm still working and balancing that out, trying to be a better wiper in the backside there. And so shout out to you, Max. We're going to talk POSIBL. We're going to talk WOVN. We're going to talk all your stores. We'll talk JP Morgan. We'll talk all these fun stuff. But you apparently a few months ago decided to make an investment. Let's give them a plug real quick, because props to you, because I am team adult wet wipe. Hashtag all the way, all day, every day.
Good Wipes, one of the fastest growing butt hygiene companies in the world. And I'm proud. I'm a proud investor. And I'm watching along the way. It's I have 2 kids, and these kids get wet wipes all day long. I didn't have that. Met this gent through a friend, and started chatting because he was raising around, and here I am, a butt wipe investor and a proud consumer.
You know what's funny? We talk all the time about people being embarrassed to admit they work in the cannabis industry and kind of coming out of their cannabis closet. Which one's more awkward to have? The fact that you work in cannabis or the fact that you work in butt wipes? Because I feel like cannabis sounds like way easier to talk about at the dinner table than the butt wipes. Maybe I'm wrong.
I would say that I'm disgusted by both at the moment. I don't know anymore. I think cannabis has its own piles of shit, and so does the good wipe angle. So yeah, here we are. But yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like one's for after the aftermath, you know, and that's okay. That is definitely, I think that's kind of like selling the shovels to the guys along with the strain, you know, or when they're gold. Fuck, I don't even know what I'm trying to fucking say. But either way, you know, I think there's definitely, I can hear that struggle in the voice clearly of the industry. And I guess my question is how many years is this for you in the industry?
Yeah, so I started dabbling in the industry in about 2013, 14. Had some buddies who just weren't part of that corporate mindset. There was a burgeoning industry in the traditional market kind of happening all over Northern California, which is where I was from. And yeah, so been in it since about 2013, 14. Went like full time kind of 2015, 16.
You're right on schedule, dude. There is a 7 to 12 year fucking thing in this industry where the people who have been in it for 10 years, 12 years, there is a level where they're like, damn it. Like this is not what I expected 10 years ago. I've literally given, you know, a large portion of my life to this. Now I have family members who count on me to grow within this fucking industry. And I will say that, you know, you're not alone for whatever reason, at that year level. The glass blowers that I worked with every day for fucking a decade, like it's all the same shit within the industry. And I guess my question is knowing that and seeing that, is it just regulatory shit, or is it the fact of how fast it's moving, or what specific things jump out that kind of you're like, damn it, I wish we were over this shit at 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all somewhat sober to the fact that like we are literally building a new industry brick by brick, and we have to really like embrace that and appreciate that, because this shit is hard. It's very, very hard. You know, I've worked in corporate environments where you have like a platform of support to go execute on your vision and go execute on your goals. But in cannabis, you're constantly derailed by things that are largely out of your control. And I think that's what's most exhausting for me. It's like you do put all your blood, sweat, and tears, heart and soul into building a new industry, and then obviously building a business in a new industry that needs to be profitable and all the things. And when you feel like the things are stacked against you year over year, and I can't tell you how many years we've gone into the new year saying, this is the year we're gonna do it. And it's this other thing happens, right? So I think that's really the exhaustion. But I always kind of like look back into the cannabis community is that kind of that beacon of hope. You know, it's kind of cheesy to say, but like, you know, the people you've been riding and dying with for that long, they're also exhausted. And in a sense, like misery loves company. And in that sense, like we're all still building the industry brick by brick, and it's hard, but we're here and we're doing it. So
there is a definite camaraderie, you know, kind of, especially between, I think, the smaller, more focused craft growers. You know, and there always is probably some weird opposition with the MSOs, but even then you kind of have to work a little in conjunction, because you're all kind of working to get this federally illegal, state by state legal, municipality illegal, you know, this very complicated legal product to sell that you don't have in some other industries. But sometimes it gets to be, I don't know, a bit overwhelming or a bit much, and everyone's just trying to prop each other up. Do you feel that balance sometimes of how to be competitive and uplifting in the industry, but also be competitive while making a profit and selling your product over their product? It's an interesting dynamic that cannabis has, because you're all fighting against, I'm going to put the proverbial man in air quotes here, right? Whatever that man is, it's the government, it's the federal, it's the state, it's the police, it's this, the stigma, all that shit, right? You're fighting all that. But at the same point, you have a lot of small other craft growers owned by some diverse folks who really need to get their light shined as well. And how do you tiptoe as an operator in a big market, in a big state, but while trying to be craft and diverse and social equity, support them, but support yourself? What's that? It's got to be tough sometimes.
It is tough. And I think, you know, how I've always tried to lead and build is through collaborative partnerships. I think folks that are just like, eat what you kill at all costs, and just, you know, the competitive mindset around revenue at all costs and all these things, like, that doesn't work. And I think that was the state of the industry. I think in the beginning, 2018, when things really got going, there was this flood of capital. People were overcapitalized in a market that wasn't mature enough. And I think they were hyper competitive mindsets. But as things have really shifted, and things have gotten tougher, it's really about aligning yourself with like partners with similar visions, you know, entering into collaborative partnerships to really elevate everybody. And I think, you know, on the POSIBL side, like, we really are all about that. We want to support, you know, all different types of brands, all different types of sizes. And we can do that just given how we've built our structure and our system, and how we basically manage and bring these types of, you know, different partnerships to market. So I think for me, it's always been how I've liked to do business is through those collaborative channels. For me, I'm a competitive person, but not in the way that I want to like smash people. I want to like partner with the right people and then just take over the market in a way that feels better. So
what traits do you feel are the things that put a company ahead of another in this industry anymore? To me, it's oversaturated with the same nonsense and the same bravado. Look at us. We just donated this to this. And look at us. We're fucking,
it's a different day, a different LinkedIn post about how branding's important. It feels like it gets the message it gets really repetitive and the same social talking points and the same things. And we have a diverse ownership. Like, we hear that a lot. So I think, how do you stand out when a lot of people have the same talking points? How do you stand out in that crowd?
It's a constant challenge. But I mean, for me, like, you're talking to you know, I'm a white guy, right? My business is something like 98% Latino, right? So I've been lucky enough to be a part of this family, to be immersed in this business culture, because, you know, traditionally I haven't had that opportunity. So I think there's something authentic to what POSIBL is building, just given the ownership structure and given the people that support us in the Salinas Valley, right? And as a Californian, I've been immersed in you know, Hispanic Latino culture as just someone who enjoys, you know, the culture of California, right? So for me, you know, POSIBL is authentically, you know, providing those opportunities, and I get to be, you know, part of that. But I think you're right. I think there definitely is an oversaturation of talking points or buzzwords. But truly the authentic companies will stand out. I think consumers, buyers, you know, human beings that are consuming anything are kind of hip to the bullshit. I would think at this point. It's really comes down to, you know, putting your money where your mouth is and doing the right things for the right reasons, rather than just doing it to, you know, get 48 likes on your LinkedIn post. So
They do like those likes. So speaking of LinkedIn, we always just to rag on it. I know it's all cannabis friendly, but people are in there. I am curious, as someone, you know, you kind of, Dustin's got way more background in the cannabis world and all the different forms coming up to it and still maintaining. I'm closer to you in a sense. I had a much traditional businessy things and have tried to apply those into there. When your people from back in the day, back in the investor finance days, know what you do now, are they shocked? Do you feel like shame? Are you proud? Like, what's it like to transition from business of business to business of cannabis, and then go back to the club and back to the place and be like, this is what I'm there now? Or do you feel like the acceptance? Are they jealous? What's that like transitioning from business to cannabis business?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I was never like comfortable in my own skin in that business. People wanted to do business with me because I was kind of like this weird California kid. So in essence, it gave me somewhat of a competitive advantage at that moment in my life, in my career. So I think they always knew that maybe I wasn't the long-term fit. So now that they see me, you know, in this kind of crazy, you know, cowboy world, they're definitely surprised. But the people that know me aren't as surprised. I think the people that meet me are surprised. They're like, oh shit, you were in finance, you were on Wall Street. Like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, right.
I think that's honestly been helpful for me too, because you know, I can go into a boardroom and I can drive a strategy conversation, or I can go up to the hills of Humboldt and talk to a crusty grower about, you know, the strains he's growing. So I think that in essence has given me like a good balance point in the industry, and it's been able to kind of, I think, elevate you know, how I have conversations and how I can kind of adapt and balance across, you know, the different people that are involved in this industry. Because at the end of the day, like cannabis, everyone came into this thing. Like, remember in 2018, like this was going to be the next big thing, right? So you had people from Wall Street, you had, you know, people from CPG, you had all these different people kind of coming in. And I think that diversity of kind of career path has helped me maybe navigate those different personalities and business people. So
do you sometimes wish that the cannabis world kind of operated more like the finance world in terms of what I think that in a way of like the finance product structure is very archaic and doesn't really change much. Oh, we're going to, you know, like the way they create finance products, except like, do you actually nowadays it's just as fast as a cannabis counter. I think of it as an archaic system where, you know, a checkbook and a fucking, you know, just some bullshit. But you're right. The more I think about it, there's derivatives and there's, you know, the way the market is 98% traded by algorithm, the way finance and products like that exist today, it is evolving just as fast as cannabis is, where every 3 months it's something new, and every 3 months
it's still more regulated and such. It still has way more processes laid out and understanding of the industry and accepted routes of business, right? You don't have that in cannabis. It's like you said before, Max. We're talking with Max Rudsten, CRO of POSIBL. You can find the link to POSIBL Project in our comments below. It's the Wild West. It's the cowboy world still. It's still very big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar, $30 billion across the United States business, but it's still considered Wild West kind of business because it's only been legal since 96, right? We're babies, we're infants in legal product world and processes, right? Even with big business coming in. But do you wish it was established? Like, do you wish you could just open up a cannabis business and you'd have all these pieces laid out and it would be all federal and legal and you wouldn't have the challenges? Do the challenges in cannabis make it a little fun?
Yeah, I talk to my peers in the industry, employees. I talk about that a lot. It's like, I don't know if I could go into a very corporate job again and be as stimulated and invigorated by the problems that you're solving there. But I will say, and this is at the beginning of the podcast here, is like, I'm exhausted too, right? So like, you can only solve so many problems so many times before you're like, I wish I just had some more structure and establishment and support and all the things. But, you know, I think to your point, Dustin, like finance culturally is, in my opinion, very archaic. But from an innovation perspective, there's all sorts of products and angles and ways to kind of take over new parts of the market. And that's what cannabis is. I mean, we're all trying to innovate here. I think innovation is being stamped down from the, you know, overregulation, the taxes, all the things. So, yeah, if the feds open this thing up, more capital flooded in, there was easier banking, I think we would get back to innovating. And right now, I think cannabis is going through a cycle where it's kind of the same shit. You know, it's like the strains that people are growing, you know, the form factors, and there's definitely some exceptions to that. But I think it's just a product of how hard it's been. You know, it's feeling a little bit tired out there right now.
Well, you're a fucking man of the passion too. You know, every company you've ever started seemed like, I don't know, man, you need a passion to get into it. You know, whether it was I read some things about a real estate kind of organization you were, you know, started, or the whiskey organization, or the fucking like.
What did I learn today? And before the show, what's the liquor we learned
WOVN,
about?
We have
no, Fernet. I want to know is a drink. I never even heard of it before till today.
Dude, and honestly, like when I think about those particular industries, I feel like it's like it's very storytelling driven brands in a lot of ways. Even the real estate, you know, shit is like you are building out a story for a client before they're buying that piece of property. In that envisioning of what they're looking for, there's always a story, and you seemed very driven by whatever that story is in that moment, you know. And even with Possible, I hear that drive. I hear that passion of like, no. We're fucking different. You can think about the corporate structure, and that's cool because that really helps me think about my family 10 years down the line. But I actually like these fucking people and what they're about. I like their why. And if I need to go to work for something or someone, I want that why to come correct.
No, Dustin, that's very intuitive. I mean, for me, finance was like, I was pushing paper around, right? Like that's literally what I was doing. It was complex. It was hard, all the things, but like there wasn't this drive. There wasn't this passion around what I was doing. That's when I pulled the ripcord, 2013. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. Like I went into my boss's office and I quit. I came back from a beach in Mexico and I was just like, I had this, you know, realization, and I quit. And the next thing I wanted to do is I actually wanted to build a business that I could hold in my hands, like a product that I could say, hey, this is mine. You know, this is for you. I want to share this with you. Right. Whereas in finance, it's just like, you're talking, you know, 4 screens, you know, the Bloombergs, all the things, right? Like this was something I could actually physically hold in my hand. So that's where the Fernet business was born. It was, I'll just give you a quick sidebar on it. So Fernet is this really herbaceous liqueur, primarily out of Italy. It's a digestif. In San Francisco at that time drank something like 40% of the Italian import of this one brand called Fernet Branca. And wow. Fernet Branca is this like cult brand within the industry community, right? So bartenders would drink this shit off the back of the bar because no one else would order it. But like there's all sorts of myths around why it became kind of this cult following. But I think it was the time when like people were drinking a lot of like Cosmos and stuff, like really sugary drinks. And all the bartenders were like, I'm done with this shit. I need like something completely on the other side of the spectrum. So they started sipping on this really bitter herbaceous thing. And it became kind of this like industry handshake. So San Francisco is a big bar community. So they just eat that shit up. And, you know, as someone who lived in San Francisco, was born in the Bay Area and drank that stuff, I remember my first shot of it. I was like, man, why don't we have our own Fernet? Like we drink 40% of the Italian import. Why don't we have our own? So that was really the passion and the drive around starting that company. Was like, I wanted to give something back to the city of San Francisco as someone who had just consumed from there. So for me, building that brand was both driven by passion, but both driven by a desire to like share something tangible with my community. And that's really what got me into cannabis too. Like learning how to build a business and scale a business in a really regulated alcohol framework got me very interested in this other framework, which was very highly unregulated at the time. So that was kind of the parallel path I went on, was building that business and brand in a really regulated alcohol supply chain, and then doing the same thing in a really kind of unregulated supply chain. So obviously like learned a ton of lessons kind of like interplaying between those two worlds.
And you brought up the magic word when I think of what Possible, and we're talking with Max Rudsten, Possible POS. I had it in my read. POSIBL We'll put the link below. Scale is the big thing. When I think Possible, and now's your moment, I'll let you give that full kind of pitch out there because we want to talk about what they're doing. Scaling is the word that I think a lot of people struggle with in cannabis. It's funny you mentioned, hey, I had this product. I wanted to make my own. Sounds a lot like a guy who wants to get into cannabis, or a person or a human who wants to get this is good weed. what can I do? Like, I want to be the person who's making it, who's growing it, who's doing that. And as we're seeing, you know, we're in a much different world here in Ohio. We're a very highly regulated medicinal state. We're both pretty familiar with Michigan, which is a little bit closer to where you're at. It's a pretty comfortable cannabis state. Surprisingly, Michigan's very forward thinking with that. Obviously not as OG as California is. But that is what happens, is a lot of people want to create their own strain, their own personal thing, their own vibe. And then you realize cannabis cultivation is expensive. It's super, super expensive. And then it's not just expensive to house the plant and water the plant and fertilize the plant and harvest the plant and pay the employees. It's hard to get some magical strains out. It's hard to get the special recipe. And so you've been able to, with It Possible Project, and it sounds like this, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times I see a celebrity will come out with a tequila line or a whiskey line or something like that, right? And it's because they have that and they go and they make a special flavor and they taste it and they're like, I like this. That's hard to do. It's easy to do when you're famous, you're Matthew McConaughey and you got lots of bucks. It's hard to do when you're a small company. Maybe you're don't have the capital to create a specialty kind of white labeled product. And a lot of people get into cannabis with the B to C in mind, the business to consumer. And Possible seems entirely focused heavily on the B2B, the getting the small person up, getting them the craft ability to grow and test and breed. Years of breeding, much simpler now with something like Possible. A pretty fair assumption. Give us the pitch. Tell us a little bit about Possible and what we're doing there.
Yeah, for sure. You know, like you said, like there's so many creative people, brand builders, ones that can go tell that passionate story to their consumer, to their buyers, right? But it's really hard to build a large scale grow that consistently puts out quality strains, a co-packing facility that can get products to market quickly, efficiently, and cost effectively. So we wanted to build an engine to really fuel those dreams and passions of the brand, you know, landscape, to say, hey, like, we're going to be your backstop, your supply chain backbone to really help you get products to market just more quickly, efficiently, and more cost effectively. And that really opens up the world for a lot of these groups to really focus on what they do best, right? Which is telling those stories. And they're not disconnected from what we're doing at all. Like our partnerships are deep in the sense that we work really closely with them around the quality that they need, around the type of strains they want to bring to market. And we try to kind of like piece those things together. So there isn't this disconnect between what they're doing and telling versus like what we're growing and supporting on the supply chain side. So there is a lot of integration, right, in how that partnership, or how those partnerships come to market. But, you know, we are a big believer in mixed light cultivation, which uses supplemental light, because, you know, brands, they need to have consistency. And I think we have built a really solid like engine to provide consistent genetics at scale kind of all year round, right? When the winter comes, the sun comes, you know, the sun isn't as bright, not as intense. So that's when the supplemental lights do their thing. And that really creates this year-long consistency, which for a lot of brands and a lot of people that buy brands, that's what they look for. Like when you go buy a McDonald's cheeseburger, this isn't a great example, but like you're going to know exactly what you're going to get. And that's really what we try to provide. And yeah, every strain is going to be different and, you know, beautiful in their own ways. But I think it's the consistency that's really, really helpful in helping these brands scale and grow in California.
Do you think that it's a communication thing or a technology thing that is actually pushes that growth? Like, or how about this? Do you believe, where do you see technology playing in all of this down the line, maintaining that? And where do you see your job as the person who's supposed to communicate this to the clients? Is it, it seems like the more technology comes into play, the less hands-on we are, the less story there is to tell. Now we are talking about consistency to help you build your brand, but how do you maintain that, like, that craftness?
Yeah.
How do you know, like, what does that mean? And technology is going to be keep removing kind of portions of that heart and soul in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like we're living in this world of like AI now, right? And I think we're like, oh, are the robots going to take over? Is AI going to take over? And my view on that is like, these are tools these are extensions of humans and extensions of human creativity and human craft, right? So like, I'm a believer in technology providing support in certain aspects, but then that being able to open up the human beings that are basically leveraging that technology to do more, you know? So I think, you know, you look at like our irrigation system. We just installed something called a private irrigation system. And that has been an incredible enhancement to our grow because we're able to get plant-specific nutrients to each different strain, whereas before we had this kind of one-size-fits-all, right? And then that allows us to be just more nimble and more flexible with the plant, right? And how that plant needs to grow. So in essence, like technology is helping our craft, right? In that example, the lights, right? The lights are high-tech, you know, supplemental lights. And that brings out, you know, different expressions of the plant that give us, you know, a different kind of craft feel. So I would say that there's certain technologies that you need to leverage to really enhance the craft. And that's kind of how we like to think about it. We're not going to be a farm where robots are going to be running up and down the checking plants. It's going to be a human connected kind of process with a technology overlay.
It's an interesting industry, though, because even as you're describing that thing, I feel like there's some legacy grower out there who is mad at you because you're not watering every single plant by hand, man, right? I think that's that weird balance in you, of all places, Northern California, Emerald Triangle, Humboldt County. I mean, you have the OGs of the OGs, and then you have the newest of the newest and the fanciest of the most biggest MSOs, right? So you're living in this area that is literally the definition of the dichotomy and the civil war that exists in cannabis, which is legacy versus big business. And I think when I think possible, when I see what you're doing with Umo and I see what you're doing with these small brands, like I think of you as this small craft grower. But when we talk about, and I have conversations with the people, and you start to introduce exactly what you said, a specific irrigation system that gives the exact amount of water to a plant, I still feel like there's someone who is frustrated by that process, who wants it to be hand everything. And I think they struggle to grasp it. How do you explain to someone that you still stay craft while embracing technology? Kind of a follow-up to Dustin there, because I think that's the tough spot with the craft growers, is what you're doing makes sense. Of course you would do that because that's going to get you consistent product. But there is someone who's frustrated because you're not small. It's like a band selling out, right? Like they get mad when you try to expand while still using the best technological tools. Do you have those conversations, those arguments? Where do you sit with that?
You know, I know that those conversations are happening. I don't frequently have those conversations. I would say that there's a beautiful place for all these types of structures and how you grow. And I think, you know, we, again, as a B2B engine, right, we have to have scale to support those visions and support those brands go to market strategy. So it's hard to kind of lump us next to maybe a mom and pop grow in the Emerald Triangle. I wholeheartedly want those types of businesses to thrive alongside this. You know what I mean? I don't think it needs to be one or the other. And I know in times of distress and times of tough, there is this kind of fine, or not fine line, but definitely a line that's being drawn between the good and the bad. And for us, it's making sure that, you know, as we mentioned earlier on competition, and it's around building a really scalable model that can support a large amount of brands. And that to us is really the vision and the values that we want to bring to this thing. But you're right. I mean, it's challenging in a world where the business was really built on the backs of those types of people in the Emerald Triangle or in the hills that were hand watering and, you know, growing plants for 40 years. And it's a shame that those businesses aren't thriving. And, you know, frankly, a lot of groups like ours aren't thriving either. You know, the whole industry is going through a bit of a moment. But yeah, I think it continues to be a challenge, but I hope that we can all just get along. Yeah.
Is the sky falling in the cannabis industry? I was just reading a news report recently. You know, it's sales last year, 2022, projected at 33 billion, only got to 30 billion. First time the last 2 years in a row, capital investments in the cannabis industry down. They saw the COVID boon. You hear stories, you know, news exploitative type stories of big companies moving out of California, these giant Canadian monolith cannabis companies shutting down because they overextended. Is it hyperbole? Is it a come to reality moment for the cannabis industry? Where is someone who's in it day to day, who does float between the craft and the big business? You have a really nice spot, who deals with a lot of small time businesses. Where is, in your mind, especially in a OG state, now the biggest state sales wise for cannabis, what is the industry like? Like, do you feel it's the pressure, or do you feel it's comfortable? Where are you sitting?
It's definitely not comfortable. It's very, very uncomfortable right now. I like to cue the lobster analogy here, because I don't know if you know how lobsters grow. People that have heard me talk probably have heard this analogy a million times.
I have not heard it. I am all ears.
But lobsters, right? They have this very hard, rigid shell. Inside, they have this malleable body. When that malleable body grows into that shell to a certain point, it's constricting, it's stressful. So the lobster goes behind a rock, ditches the shell, regenerates a larger shell, and then does this process over and over until it dies, right? So for me, when I feel that stress and that uncomfortability, it is a signal that there's growth happening, right? In my opinion. I do say this every year, and I do say this every month. So there's constant growth because it is so fucking hard. Yeah. But what I would say is it's just what we're going through right now is a cycle, right? Like, there was this hyper overinvestment of capital into an industry that wasn't really set up for it. There's, I think, a lot of factors that are at play here. You probably heard recently about a large distribution company that went out of business in California. That was one of the largest distribution businesses, and that has an intense ripple effect on the entire industry. So I think right now what you're seeing is there's a lot of groups that raised a ton of capital. They raised a ton of debt capital. They might be working well on getting revenue and profitability up, but then when you look at that debt service and the amount that they have to pay to service that debt, it's almost impossible to dig out of the holes, right? And I think generally, folks that have lended to the industry, equity investors who have played in the industries, they're also exhausted, right? So it's like, how much longer are they going to continue to lend, continue to give money for equity, right? And I don't know what the number is today, but I think last I checked, like, equity capital is down something like 90-something%, right? In cannabis.
Yeah, no. And we're seeing it right now. We're seeing those, we got a case right here in Ohio. We're seeing some debt collectors come a-calling, right? I think it's exactly right. You're seeing a lot of companies, big and small, that got overextended, like a lot of startups, right? A lot of startups crash because they sell the dream, they get the buy-in, they get the money to build infrastructure, and then it just doesn't sell. The market's saturated. So I don't know if you're, like, you've thought about this, and being someone who's in finance, just curious, like, advice to someone who's small company or whatever in that spot. What would you do? What would you do if you overextended yourself? Let's brainstorm for a minute. Max Rudsten from POSIBLE.com, the Chief Revenue Officer, easy for me to say. We are a struggling company. We are in too much in debt. Me, you, and Max, me, you, and Dustin, Max. We need to make some revenue. You're our CRO. Like, how do we get out of this hole? Do we sell the company? Like, what do you suggest, or off-kilter advice to someone who's maybe in that spot?
Yeah, it's challenging. So you're saying if there's a business that's already overextended itself,
like overextended. We got a couple of cases here.
Don't overextend yourself. That's what I would say first. You want to have a lender that you can renegotiate those terms with, and they need to believe in the vision in your story, and they need to understand the pathway to becoming more sustainable and profitable. So it really is not a revenue at all cost game anymore, which it was, right? Now it's like, how do you build a sustainable business foundation that you can scale, and how do you show your lender that plan is going to help them get their money back, right? And that's really, it's really a relationship and a conversation, and that's how lenders should be, quite frankly. And it all comes down to how tired and how exhausted that lender is, right? But from a sustainability standpoint, like, you have to be looking at your margins and your labor and making most efficient use of what you built. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is that given the overregulation, the taxes, all the things, the lack of retail in California, right? There's not a ton of margin, right? So it's almost like you really need capital to continue to keep the lights on so you can grow to a place that creates healthier margins. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for a lot of these groups that have overextended, is that it's just the pathway is an arduous one. Sorry, everyone's quiet.
No, it's deep in thought, because we have, I know Dustin's the same, but we know people going through this. Companies we're proud, we associate with, we've seen it. It's the exact same problem in Canada. It's the same thing. It's from biggest of scale with Aurora Nordic and Canopy Growth, extending to overseas sales, to the smallest of no names, please companies here in Ohio that we work with. They're both in the same boat. They went big, they got buyers in, and now they're in the news saying, hey, which means, by the way, like anything, I follow enough sports to know once that negotiation hits the news, once the media is aware of this, that means they've already done that renegotiation process. They've already asked for money. Like when you're being publicly outed, chances are the extensions are over, right? I don't think that they're there. So it feels sad, because we know some amazing people, and this isn't just people we know, and everyone knows some amazing people in this industry who are just going to be a lot in debt. And I don't know. I don't know the best way to help them get out, other than maybe get out of it. But it feels a lot of people chase that dream and overextend
So how
themselves.
do you approach your partnerships then, with all that over your head? How do you say, hey, I want to build this, I want to help you build your brand. We can help this consistently, but you are taking resources that you theoretically could have given to another company that might have been more loyal or better. Like how do you build those partnerships? What is some of the 7 questions you ask when you're asking these guys that just instantly let you know whether this is going to be a brand for life or a brand for now?
Yeah, it's a very important question, because what I've learned is this needs to be a very, very intertwined, collaborative partnership, right? It's not just hey, we're providing a service and that's it. The margin for error is slim, right? Yeah. The margin of error is slim for us too. We can't overextend resources into a company that we don't believe has the chops to succeed, because that can hurt our business, right? So there is a lot of consultative approaches to how we build partnerships, really understanding their team, their differentiating factors, kind of what sales infrastructure looks like, what their go-to-market strategy looks like. And those things don't always need to be perfect. It's not hey, if I didn't like that answer, see you next time, I'll go pick another brand. There is a true partnership there in saying well, this is how maybe we would do it differently based on all the things that we've learned from all our partners and from our brands that we bring to market. So I think there is a knowledge base that we've built from working with so many brands and building brands and pushing them through market, that we can be very consultative in how we set that thing up. But it is a pretty robust, it's not a intensive due diligence process by any means, but there are a lot of conversations. There's a lot of strategy that goes into the pre-planning before we bring a brand in the door.
All right, we talked about all that unfun stuff. Let's talk about some fun shit for a bit. We know about Umbo. We know about some of the great brands you got going there. We've had some couple of guests on there to talk about it. What are some of the other cool brands? What's happening at Possible, the project, possibleproject.com, the link below. What are some cool things you guys are doing? What are some small brands that you found, or you have some genetics? What's the haps over there?
We just welcomed a new little portfolio of brands into the family called Paradiso and Dovetail. Run by this wonderful OG named Christina DePaci. She's been through it. Trust me. She actually used to run a large farm in the area. She started a brand called Paradiso and then another brand called Dovetail. Paradiso is a very beautiful, high design brand. It leans kind of female, but it's it can be smoked by anyone. It's like connoisseur style weed. In a beautiful jar box. It's something that is really kind of adding another element to our larger portfolio strategies, the higher kind of premium side of what we're doing. And then Dovetail is what I would call the good, which is more of a smalls kind of pre-roll brand to kind of hit more that value price point. So those two combined alongside Umo have created this like kind of good, better, best portfolio strategy that we're super excited about. So I would say that one, and you know, like any of these things, bring people into the family. It's like, it's not just the brand IP, it's like the human beings right behind it.
Yes.
And for me, like Christina is an inspiring individual, someone who's been in this game for a long time, and will help not only bring those brands back to market, but also help with POSIBL and how we think through menu and genetic strategy and all the things. So I would say that those would be two I would mention on here.
If you want to check them out, you can go to smokedovetail.com, or I believe it's paradisiogardens.com.
Yep. There you go. Thank you, Dustin.
We'll put the link in the comments there below. High percentage THC. Overrated, underrated, properly rated. Anything above, let's set a number. Dustin, when I say high percentage THC, I know what Max is in it, so I'm not in it. So he's got a number. Dustin, for you, when I say high percentage THC flower, what number do you put that at in your brain?
Probably over 20.
I think that's higher. I say high percentage THC. I think over like 33, 34, right? When you say, or someone says high percentage THC, because I'm trying to get to this ridiculous, like the 40% shit that people are breeding, which I think is overrated, my opinion. So when I say high percentage THC, Max, what in your world does that mean? Like flower?
I would say, so there's different like sub bands here, but
okay, teach us.
Over 30%. Anything over 30% is like, in my opinion, your high potency THC. There are certain groups in the market that will actually price their product based on potency percentages. So if you're 35 to 40%, you're going to get this rate. If you're 30 to 34%, you're going to get this. If you're 25, right? So it's like a pricing potency, but I would say 30% and above is high enough. 35 to 40 is probably too high in my opinion. And then if you want to go down the path, does that really matter to me as a smoker? No, it does not.
Well, that's where the big question is: marketing ploy or legit thing? Because I think we'll hear both comments. We've had some people on before who start to get mad. They're like, if you tell me it's 50% THC, it's like, there's no flower in there. Like, it's impossible. You can't even get that. It's mathematically, you know, so I feel like it's a buzzword, and you nailed, Max, exactly the reason why. It's a price point thing. We have that here in Ohio on our medicinal cannabis. You get price pointed, the higher THC percentage. Lab results, you know, you're not allowed to independently test here, and that makes people really mad. How do I know it's 34% THC and not 27%? You know, so that point and people using it, does that bother you? Do you like the price point thing? I mean, you're growing craft quality cannabis, so obviously there has to be a price increase for the love and attention and detail. But test results, that's an icky business, man. That's an icky business.
I would agree. I personally hate it. It's not good for the industry. I think it's an education thing right now. I think that, you know, as an alcohol consumer, those folks aren't going into a 7-Eleven and buying, you know, Everclear because it's the highest ABV. You know, it's a weird kind of world we're navigating right now, and that's really driving a lot of the strain breeding too. It's like you got to get high potency, and that will take away some of the terpenes in certain, you know, genetics. So it's kind of creating this, in my opinion, like stale, you know, breeding environment, right?
Yeah.
And you know, some of the best weed I've ever smoked was 16%.
That's THC. What I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. That's me. I'll get rocked off of that.
Yeah, it's a shame, man. But it's the reality we're living in. And how does that change? You know, there's got to be a big force of the education piece. And I think people have tried, and it's very, very challenging. But you have these uneducated consumers that are coming into a finite amount of retail institutions, and those buyers are buying the high potency stuff because they know that anything below a certain potency is not going to sell. And that just becomes very, very challenging for the market. But like, you know, there's folks from Humboldt that are growing, again, the terpiest, low potency, you know, stuff that will get you way more high. So like, you know, so that's tough though, but that's how we have to put our genetic strategy together. That's honestly the truth. Like, we need to make strains that are marketable. And the only way that they're going to be marketable is if they're over a certain percentage. Yeah. We're not charging. We're not playing the game where it's higher percentage and we're going to charge more. We don't play that game. We just grow really high quality weed, and it has to be somewhat potent. But the lab stuff is all a whole nother thing, and you know, people game that stuff, which is not cool. But yeah, so that's the world we're living in.
Speaking about educating, you're a dad, right? You have a couple of kids. Yeah.
I got two.
So I keep breaking out. Sorry. So I guess not only are you educating the industry, but what is it like to be a dad in the industry? I mean, both BC and I have, each of us, different situations that have like kind of called us upon to, that the public knows we're a dad within the industry, and that provides a little bit of awkwardness. Additionally, I'm kind of curious at what that educating with the kids are like for what you do with work, and how that conversation kind of goes from work to at home a little bit.
Oh, good question.
Yeah, my kids are still very, very young. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So we're not quite at the level of having those conversations. I will say that I bought a children's book about a grandma who grows weed in her backyard, which is kind of cool. And it's like the girl kind of like going through her garden, and like it's a kind of a dope way to at least start to present.
Oh, it ends up being her medicine, or like, I fucking read that book. What's the book name?
I forget it. I forget the name. You could probably find it, but it's that to me is cool. You know, just starting to introduce it at that level. You know, so I don't know, man. I don't know what that's going to go like
it's weird. I got to think though. I mean, I'm ahead of Dustin. I have 4 kids. I have 25, 16 and 2 14. So I'm a different area. Dustin's are younger. You only have 1, right, Dustin? I don't know.
I got 10, 11, and 12.
Oh, that's right. I'm totally off. I currently don't know you at all. Just met you. How you doing? Like, that was terrible. My bad. So I've gone through some of it, right? I actually just had one of my first experiences with my oldest son, which was surreal and weird. So I've gone through it, but I hope in California, like, I feel like it's maybe a little more acceptable to PTA meeting to say you're in cannabis. Do you feel like it's a little more acceptable? Because socially here, I still don't. I mean, I'll do this and that, but if I go to like a school function, I say I work in marketing and I stop. I don't say more unless they ask. Like, I have learned, and I get mad, and I've been on this rant before, that if I worked for a local brewery, everyone would think I'm cool, but because I work in weed, they're like, bad. Is it a little bit more acceptable in California? Because you have more people in the industry. I got to think parents and such are more involved. Like, the stigmas can't be as bad, or maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, I did the same thing. I'm like, I'm in consumer packaged goods, or I'm
stop.
Sales revenue.
No more.
Yeah, very general. I started ripping the Band-Aid off when it really got legal, and I just started I said, F it. Like, I'm just gonna be open about this. It's legal now, and I think California is pretty hip to it. They're open to it. I think there is a world of people that aren't in the cannabis industry, or kind of outsiders, are like, oh man, cannabis, money must be like falling from trees, man. Like, people that aren't really like tapped in. So that's like a weird kind of thing to have to navigate, in conversations. But no, I think California is full on like embraced it. And I'm not hiding it when I have conversations. I guess like the kids' teachers haven't asked. I don't think I've mentioned it to the kids' teachers yet.
Hey, one of these days I got to tell. So here's what Dustin and I have learned. Have that answer ready to go, because they're going to say at some point it's
just
going to come up. Yeah.
Yeah. My son went to school, and the first time that his teacher, like held him out at lunchtime to like get to know him, he was like, my daddy has a cannabis show on YouTube. Like, first sentence, he didn't even, it wasn't like, I love sports. It was up, daddy has a cannabis show, and it's like, fuck. So yeah, I definitely, it just happened. So that's what made me think of it.
Yeah.
It's a weird world, that we navigate. And like I said, I think it's got to be a little bit easier, but it's still, there's a look down upon versus, I think, even alcohol that is so weird to me sometimes. And part of it's the federal legality, but it's a balance, right? It's a balance for parents to figure out. So I don't know. I don't know how to solve it, Max. I'm not quite sure. Dustin, you playing the music? Ending the show? I guess we're ending the show. Wrapped it up. Yeah, I'm going to call you out on the spot. I wasn't prepared for that. We're talking. Thank you, Max Rudsten, CRO. This is Chief Revenue Officer of POSIBL, POSIBLproject.com, POSIBL project.com. You'll find the link below as well as some of the other links we talked about. We really appreciate you joining us today, Max.
You're awesome, man. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. And you guys, everyone listening at home, we really appreciate you guys listening today on this brand new show of Because Cannabis every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on Spotify, video podcasts, and everywhere you listen to audio podcasts on Thursdays. Follow us socially at MeetWM, at Meet Wayward on Facebook. Don't forget Plant Save My Life podcast coming soon. Wayward Media. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.